our group here, the SharePoint Services group, you can find within the Managing Applications and Data within Information Technology and Security Consulting. Our SharePoint team is even subdivided into 4 main areas. We focus primarily on these 4 areas, although they do interchange quite a lot. The consulting group, these focus on much larger projects, so complete things. Not necessarily large in size, but they're complete entities. So we'll work on intranets and extranets, some public-facing sites, a lot of strategy, some business intelligence work. We got our support group, which does both on the phone, on site, along with some in-person support as necessary. Obviously 100% SharePoint certified, and we have a lot of tiers of support needs. Everything from site down, which a lot of our members get the notification, to if you get a chance, could you change the wording or the color on this particular page? So that group has worked a long time there. And then our training group, that's the focus of this portion of the organization. Our main focus is on-site private training. We do a lot of strategy with private training and strategy with user adoption work. We do a fair amount of virtual training as well on the private side, and as you'll see here in a minute, on the public side. We license curriculum, and we work with a lot of conferences. We've got an upcoming conference, as you'll learn about here, down in Dallas in a couple weeks. And then finally, we've got our add-ons group. Nintex is one of our partners that we work with a lot with forms and workflow. And we have a couple of partners there for content migration and search that we have a lot of faith in and do a lot of work with. So just a little overview on today's webinar. The topic, hopefully you know by now, is SharePoint Styling and Branding. It's presented by Marc Anderson. He's a SharePoint MVP. It should be over at around 2 o'clock, so it's about an hour long. So if you can plan your afternoon around that, if you get an email about when you'll be free. And then with questions, please use the questions window at really any time, but we will save the questions until the end. That allows Marc to really focus on the curriculum at hand, and then be able to come and answer them as necessary at the end, and make sure multiple people don't ask the same question, and if they do, he can answer it once. And this session is being recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channel, so please do check that out. If you have to leave, or if you hear something today that you think someone else in your organization might be interested in, definitely forward that along. And everyone will be getting a follow-up email with a link to that recording, so thank you for that. And then the focus. Today's focus is on SharePoint Design Manager. And the key there is today's focus. The next presentation that Marc will be giving will focus on another topic that's building off of Design Manager here today. So please take a look at that as well on our schedule coming up. In the course, so this is building up, both of these webinars are building up for our SharePoint 2013 Styling, Branding, and Responsive Design course. It's taking place on November 18th and 19th from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Marc will be presenting as well. That's up in Boston and available online as well. So if you're in Boston, there's the address. And you can learn more on our website as well. So thank you for that. And one last thing here, SharePointConference.org. It's October 19th through 21st. The conference itself is on the 20th. And the day before and the day after are full of training. So on the day before, we have a styling and branding course that Marc will be presenting on, along with a power user course. And the day after the conference, on the 21st, we'll have a business intelligence and administration and architecture course. The whole conference is packed full of some SharePoint MVPs. I think we're at 7 at this point. So definitely check that out if you're looking to hear from some more great people like Marc. And again, today's presenter, Marc is a I learned that today, 4-time SharePoint MVP with over 30 years of technology experience. He's a regular partner and popular presenter at our conference. He's presented for a number of years, and we're big fans of Marc. Marc's got a great blog. It's simpmarc.com. Definitely check that out if you have a chance, if you have any interest in sort of what he was talking about here today. And you'll have his contact information and our contact information there at the end. So feel free to reach out to both of us if you have questions. So without further ado, I'd like to get started here today, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Marc.
All right, John, thanks. Let's hope we both push the right buttons here. Let's see, I'm showing my screen. Can you give me a thumbs up, John, if you've got visuals?
It all looks great.
All right, great. So thanks for that introduction, John. I was looking on your map of Protiviti offices, and I don't think you have an office where I am right now. I'm coming to you live from the island of Jersey in the English Channel. I'm here for SharePoint Saturday, coming up this Saturday. So hopefully all of this technology will work the way we want it to, and this will go well. If not, I apologize. So today we're gonna sort of jump into part of this styling and branding class that I teach with Protiviti, sometimes with Kyle Schaefer, who's somebody who used to work there, who's a very smart design guy. So a lot of the great material in here was developed by him at one point. I've added some things. And what we're going to try and do, there's some contact information for me, but we'll talk about that at the end probably. So this is a view of the agenda of the whole class, and what we're going to not do today, just so you know what the class also has in it, is a whole section on SharePoint design strategy. It's only one bullet here, but it's actually a huge piece of the class, and I'm skipping right past that today. Then there's a whole section on what you can do within the SharePoint 2013 user interface to help implement your design and your branding, and that's where I'm going to focus today, but on a very abbreviated level. And then there's another section at the sort of the end of the class where we talk about responsive whole design, shape and CSS tricks with media selectors and things like that. What we're going to do today is that middle section, but by no means all of it. So even though it looks like a huge amount of the agenda, it's actually not. It's a minority of the slides, and most of what I'm going to show you after I do the slides very quickly is online. So I'm going to show you right in the SharePoint interface. So let's take a look at that interface. So this is the SharePoint 2013 page. This is the home page of a publishing site when you first create a site collection with that publishing template. You'll notice that it's got some very helpful language, but more importantly, I wanted to just go through some of the sections of the page that are important to know about as you're thinking about branding. Some of you probably are already on SharePoint 2013, either with SharePoint Online or on premises, and others of you may be in SharePoint 2007 or 2010 and planning to make the move. So you may not know all of the sections of the page, and I'm going to go over some of the more important ones, which should be analogous even if you haven't started with SharePoint 2013. So that first arrow that just popped up along the top, that top bar that goes from left to right, the dark blue one, is what's known as the suite bar. On Office 365, they've actually changed the CSS to call it the Office 365 bar. But the idea is that that's where some of the sort of uber navigation that gets you from place to place, not just within SharePoint, but within Office 365. And then in this screenshot, just between the newsfeed and SkyDrive, which shows you how dated the slide is. But it would say OneDrive if this were on premises now. So that's the suite bar. The next thing we have that's not in earlier versions of SharePoint, so those top two bars are not, is a section where we have some actions we can take. We can share, we can follow, and that bar is another thing that's sort of on top of everything, but just within SharePoint. Not as much as the top bar is, which is everywhere within the interface, but within SharePoint we have that next bar. Then of course we have the site logo, which is something that should be familiar to everybody who's ever used SharePoint. It just happens to be a rectangle now. We have a top nav, which is again similar to what we have in earlier versions, but the markup in the CSS is a bit varied and a bit different in 2013 than it is in earlier versions. We have a search box, which is again very familiar to everyone. We have the quick launch. The quick launch is the same in the same place, has the same general purpose, but as you'll see, it shows different links than you might be used to if you're using an earlier version. It actually tries to show you recent links, though you can also pin links or add links to it like you're used to. And then, of course, the rest of the page, which is sort of the main pane of any SharePoint page, which is the sort of main content area that makes any one page different from any other. So those are some of the basic sections of the page we need to care about. So new in SharePoint 2013 is something called the Design Manager. And like I said, I'm going to go through these slides probably pretty fast because it's going to be more interesting to show you this in the interface. But this way you'll have the slides that may help tie it together if you need it. I'll make sure that John has this copy of the slides and can get it to all of you. So the Design Manager is something that's new in SharePoint 2013. It lets you change the look and the feel, but in a sort of abstracted way from what we were able to do in earlier versions. We're used to, those of us who have been working for SharePoint for a while and doing branding, or at least branding implementation, we're used to hacking around in master pages that we never really understood all that well. We had to learn as we went. Of course, the more you do, the more simple it gets to you, but a lot of people only end up customizing one master page, which is the one that they have on their company intranet, for instance. Those of us who are consultants, we've sort of gotten used to that hacking the whole master page idea. So the Design Manager makes that process a bit more seamless, makes it make more sense, hopefully. It lets you do things like compose looks, design packages, so we can actually package design treatments together and move them from environment to environment, which is great when you have a software development lifecycle. You can manage device channels. There have been sort of flavors of this in the past, but the device channel idea is different here than it is in previous versions, so it's almost a new thing. And we can also manage our design assets and templates. We can work with our design now in a different way than we have in the past by using HTML-based templates. Rather than ASPX pages which we're editing, whether it's for the master page or for page layouts, we're actually using HTML-based templates instead of ASPX or master page files. And that makes it actually quite a bit more accessible to most designers, and I'll show you why. We have something called the Snippet Editor, which is new, that enables us to put pieces of SharePoint content generation functionality into our HTML-based templates, like copying snippets of SharePoint code that normally would have been in the master page in the past, and just pasting it into our HTML design. And I'll show you how that works. We have master pages, which are, again, HTML-based as our page layouts. And then we have another thing that's new, which is display templates, which are ways that we can display primarily search-based results, but also things like list views. And we have, again, an HTML-based with some JavaScript way to format the data that's retrieved by those various, from the various web parts that can provide us that sort of data source. We're not going to cover display templates today. That's really a whole session into itself, but it's a very cool thing, and if you're getting into 2013 design, you definitely need to know about them. So the first thing that you can do, probably the sort of entry point for design or brand implementation with SharePoint 2013, is this thing called composed looks. If you're used to using themes, if for some reason the wheat theme has been a very popular one going back to SharePoint 2007. A lot of people will take the wheat theme and customize it a little bit for some reason. I guess it's sort of a muted color palette. It's sort of that concept, but you get a little bit more of a tactile, sort of real-time WYSIWYG feel for what your composed look looks like. And you have also a bit more control over the color palette, which you see on the left, your site layout, which you choose based on which master pages you have, and also the font families you want to use. So you actually can go pretty far with this. If you're a small shop and you really don't have a lot of development skills, you sort of think that HTML sounds a little scary, then composed looks might be a good place to start. It does let you get pretty far along with just at least a color palette and fonts and things like that to make your SharePoint installation feel at least a little bit more aligned with your company identity. I doubt that you would use this marble background, but you can do some pretty nice stuff with this. So that's a simple way to go. More complex way is actually going through this whole design manager process, which again I'll jump into the interface and show you. I mentioned that we can create design packages. So one of the end results of going through this whole process is that we can sort of package up all of the other steps. This is step 8 on the left. If we've gone through all those other steps, and it's actually quasi-linear. It probably should be an unordered list, but it's an ordered list. If we go through those steps in the process, we can actually take this design that we've built in totality, including the graphics and image files and all that sort of stuff, and package it up into a design package that we can move from one environment to the next. So that's sort of the end step in this as a process. Another thing that we can do is start to manage for different device types. You read a lot of things in the press, or sort of in the design world now, where it's go mobile first, do responsive first. Those may or may not be the right things for you, but device channels, depending on your user base and what kind of site you're building. But device channels is a way that you can start to manage how SharePoint shows up on different devices with different characteristics. So that's a nice piece of functionality. If you do get into responsive design, device channels becomes a little bit less important, but it's an important feature to understand that it's there, and that you can use it not just to target different device sizes or resolutions, but also different types of users or different types of browsers, because you're really looking at the user agent string there to make a bunch of sort of rules-based decisions. We can also import HTML templates. I told you I'm going to go through these slides fast. We can upload design files that we get from, say, an outside designer. So many times we, at least I see with my clients, that some outside design firm, sometimes it has a design firm that has no idea about what SharePoint even is or how it works. We'll come up with a design in something like Dreamweaver, and they'll just hand over some HTML files with some images, maybe some JavaScript, a couple of plugins, maybe something like Backbone to make it more responsive. So we just, we get this pile of stuff, and in the past we've had to try to sort of quasi-shoehorn that in to the design in SharePoint using the master page and CSS that's already there. There are different schools of thought about that. In this design manager model, we can actually upload those HTML files and build from there. So rather than starting with what sometimes is called a starter master page, and there's some very good ones out there from Kyle. He has a nice one called SP Blueprint. Eric Overfield has a Codeplex project, and Randy Driscoll has a set of starter master pages. Instead of starting with a .master page, we can actually start with that designed HTML page and upload it and all of the other artifacts. Once we have those files uploaded, we have this new thing called the Snippet Gallery, and this is what the general interface looks like. The things up in the ribbon are the pieces of functionality that you're used to seeing in a master page in earlier versions of SharePoint, but you never really could tell where they started and ended. When you were editing the master page, the markup was a little messy. There's no comment. There weren't any comments in there. We all just had to get really used to sort of understanding what pieces did what. There are a bunch of tags that start with SharePoint : something, and the Snippet Gallery really sort of takes us at least one layer out of really thinking about that by giving us markup based on some settings that we choose in the Snippet Gallery. So again, sort of thinking about the general layout of what a SharePoint site looks like. If you're building a site that sort of adheres to the general SharePoint ethos, I'm a big fan of making SharePoint not look like SharePoint enough so that people don't call it SharePoint. They don't really think of it as SharePoint the software. They think about it as Bob's Intranet, or the Hive, or whatever the cool name is that you come up with for your intranet, or if it's a public-facing site, whatever your organization's branding is. They don't really need to know it's SharePoint, and they probably shouldn't know that it's SharePoint. So if you are, however, sort of adhering to the general structure of what SharePoint looks like, and this would be most often in the case of an intranet, you still probably want to keep all of those things that just slid into color here. That sort of general framing of an intranet is pretty common. We may add some sort of coolness to it. We may even do something crazy like move the quick launch from the left to the right. But generally speaking, for collaborative sites, we want to hang on to a lot of that same sort of structure and functionality that's in the master page. If we're doing an internet-facing, an external site, we may do away with all of that altogether and start essentially from scratch with our HTML-based design. So we have a lot of options that we can go through with the design manager now that it's there. And again, page content ought to be the most focused thing, but often the stuff that's not green here is what gets most of the attention, rather than are we getting the right content into the page, and is it formatted in a way that's actually going to make people who are consuming it most productive, as opposed to the way people who are publishing it want it to look. That's a little editorial diatribe I could go off on, but I'll skip it for now because we're trying to cover a lot. So parts of the master page that are important are these content placeholders. And if you're used to editing master pages directly in earlier versions of SharePoint, you're used to seeing these content placeholders. They're basically reserved sections where you're going to place some sort of content later, either in a page layout or in a page itself, that the master page needs to have a sort of a placeholder for. The name is actually quite explanatory. So we can have placeholders in the master page that actually have content in them. We can have placeholders that are empty that will be filled in at a later point in the page assembly life cycle. But we basically build everything up from the idea of content placeholders. There are a lot of these placeholders. This is a list that I think probably even omits some of the less common ones, and you probably can't even read it very well, depending on how this slide is coming over through the ether. This list is a useful one, though, because we have the descriptions on the right. Some of these are used in just about every SharePoint-based master page. Placeholder main is probably one that is always there. Placeholder page title is almost always there because that actually sets the title of the browser tab. Some of these are pretty obscure, but it's good to know what this full list is, because they're the placeholders that you're going to end up working with and adding into your HTML-based master page as you're trying to sort of take that design and turn it into SharePoint, or a SharePoint master page. These content placeholders, like I said, there are a lot of them, but these are the most common ones. So those are the I think it's six, that you definitely want to understand the best. Placeholder main is that main green section in the prior slide. Page title in the title area is the area in the page that shows you sort of what kind of page or what page you're on. If you think about a list view, it usually is the name of the list. The top nav bar, that should be self-explanatory. The top nav is the navigation that goes across the top of the page, not the sweep bar and that action bar below it, but the top nav bar that's part of each site or each sub-site in its pages. The left nav, which is where the quick launch goes. The search area, which is the search box or circle or whatever it is you end up branding it to look like. It's not always a box, but there's a search area into which we put things that people can interact with search. And the additional page head, which is most often used to sort of inject JavaScript and additional CSS, but can be used for some other things that are a little bit less frequent. And you can also create your own placeholders, so that's an important thing to know. These existing placeholders are just what SharePoint gives you. You can actually have a placeholder that's, placeholder, you don't even have to call it placeholder, but placeholder user cards or something, where you're going to put up little business card looking things of users randomly so that you're introducing people across the organization. Placeholders are exactly that. They're things, they're those areas where you're going to put content later. Content in SharePoint pages, we actually are inserting content into the master. After the master page is loaded, we actually are inserting content into those content placeholders as the page loads. So that's sort of how the page is assembled. Whether or not we're using publishing. If we're using publishing, the page layouts come next. If we're not using publishing, then the page itself comes next. But there's sort of there's a sequence that every page goes through in order to be assembled before it gets to the browser. in the SharePoint pages, we sort of inject the actual content that makes that page what that page is, going into the content placeholder in the markup for that page itself. And then, it's an important thing to talk through here, that distinction between collaboration and publishing. There are some people who think that everything should be collaboration. There are some people who think that everything should be publishing. I probably lean a little bit more toward collaboration because I'm a knowledge management guy. I like a lot of interactivity in the sites that I build, but that's not always what my clients want. Publishing may be more a one-to-many kind of publishing thing with no sort of interaction with the content, may be the model for particular types of sites as well. So this slide tries to give you a little bit of an understanding of how these two different SharePoint models break out. They're two of the sort of major models that you can think of when you're coming up with how your sites or your site collections ought to work. There are some site templates that fall into each of these buckets. Those are the examples. And then when publishing is enabled versus not, you get different functionality in that site collection. So if we haven't turned on the SharePoint Server Publishing Site Collection feature, we can't inherit the master page down to subsites, which can be very frustrating. So we'll often turn that on just to be able to do that. We don't have templates that we can work with. The only way to change the page structure is to manually edit each page. So if you have a lot of sort of less free-form page structures and more rigid or prescribed page structures, you're probably going to want to use publishing. There are a lot of nuances to this, but hopefully this slide gives you a little bit of a rule of thumb kind of idea. What I think we see in a lot of cases is this sort of collaboration and publishing together, that hybrid that I was talking about, where we take a collaboration site like a team site, enable or a site collection with a team site at the root, or any other sort of collaboration focused site template, and we enable the publishing site collection feature, and it gives us some of the benefits of publishing as well as the benefits of the collaboration sort of environment as well. So that's something to consider as you're moving into sort of thinking about how you want your site collection to feel. And this will vary based on site collection across your maybe across your intranet. One may be very team oriented, very interactive, a lot of content give and take. Another section of it maybe where you're publishing benefits from HR, for instance, which would really be more of a few to many kind of publishing model, where you really do want to use a publishing site because no one is really going to interact with that content. So at this point, I'm just going to hop over into the user interface and show you how all of this works. I know I'm going very fast, and I hope that you're not getting frustrated with the speed of my talking. I feel like I'm talking fast.
Mark, just before we hop into this,
break in there.
Sorry, Mark, just before we hop into this, I just want to make sure with everyone that we can see the full screen. There were a couple people that mentioned that there was having a hard time taking a look at the screen, and just want to make sure everyone can see the full screen there.
Okay, yeah, I'm in my browser now, so what you should see is, actually let me go to the home page of the site here. So what you should see is toward the right, you'll see my photo toward the right top. I don't know if you're not seeing that, then it's probably getting cut off on the right. This is the home page of a publishing site. If you're having a problem, why don't you raise your hand or let John know, and I'll see if I can figure out what I need to adjust.
Yeah, it looks like the right side is cut off, Mark.
Okay. Any suggestions on what I should be changing here? Let's see. Does that make it any better?
Does not look like it's changed it right there yet.
Okay. What I'm trying to do is just show the browser window instead of my entire desktop. Does that? Now I'm just showing the browser application. Does that make any difference?
No, it still looks like it's just the top left portion of your screen.
All right. Let's bump down the resolution here. Sorry about this, guys. Should have tested this before we got going. How's that? Is that any better? Nope, let's pause, sorry. Play. How about that?
Yep, that looks like it's working great, Mark. Thank you.
All right, good. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm actually doing this on my Surface 3 Pro. Just it should prove to you that these are actually usable things. It's all I'm traveling with these days. It's actually pretty cool. But sometimes it does some strange stuff with the screen that I'm just not used to yet. So I apologize for that.
So,
All right.
so Mark,
so here we're on the home page of a.
Sorry, Mark. Just this. It looks like I thought the first couple responses were yes, 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 and then a couple people commented we still can't see your picture. So it's still not quite all the way there to the right.
So along the top, do you see sites, tasks, delve, admin, and then my picture? So are we cutting off somewhere along there?
Yeah, it looks like we're getting just to tasks.
All right. We'll really scrunch it down. How about that?
Looks like everything on this side. We can see your picture.
Now
And
we've got all right, so now an interesting little thing that happens with SharePoint when you go into a lower resolution, you notice that we get our lovely ellipses here. So SharePoint is adjusting based on the width and the resolution of my screen. So that's a nice sort of, in essence, it's the beginnings of what you would think of as a mobile strategy in a sense. You'll notice that as I actually narrow SharePoint down, that we get an ellipsis for just about everything there. So that's actually a nice little branding treatment that SharePoint does for you in 2013 that you would never have seen before. So we get a learning experience out of that. All right, so here we are at the homepage of a publishing site. You'll notice that we get this sort of guide here, which is nice. This is a page that you will, sort of not immediately blow away, but when you first create a publishing an enterprise publishing site collection, this is the home page of that site collection. So it helps you go through some of the things that you would want to do based on your role in the whole sort of branding and styling exercise. So on the left side, information architect kinds of things like defining content types, which is to me one of the most important things you can do in SharePoint, but I'm not going to talk about that left side stuff. We're really going to talk more about what we do as a visual designer. We can import a design package, like I mentioned. That's where you have the full package that someone has handed you from another SharePoint environment. But let's hop right into design your site, because this is sort of the starting point that you'll go to, whether you've been handed an HTML design or you're the one who's doing that HTML design in something like Photoshop or Dreamweaver or whatever. These are the 8 steps along the left side. The first one's a welcome step, so it doesn't really tell us much that we want to do. The first thing, though, that we can do is this pre-installed look, which is actually what those composed looks are. And you see we get a bunch of these out of the box. In theory, you can build your own composed looks, though I don't see a lot of people doing it any more than I saw a lot of people doing their own custom themes in earlier versions of SharePoint. But if we want to click on one of these, I'll click on Sea Monster. I like the name of it if nothing else, right? We can actually try this out live, which is sort of cool. Hopefully this will go fast, and I won't want to hit the back button too quickly. So we actually can do a live preview of what this theme implementation looks like. It's not quite there, obviously, because I'm getting a big white page. You can see it's loading, but it's going slowly. So you can see that we can do quite a lot with this kind of composed look, and this is one of the out-of-the-box ones without me changing anything. So that's pretty cool. If we go back, it's not quite there, we can do things like change this background image. We can change the colors, so we could come up with a different sort of color palette. And you'll notice I'm seeing that as I mouse over these color palettes, which are just a bunch that are that are given to you by SharePoint out of the box by Microsoft. You can change the fonts here. I don't think you get quite as much of a WYSIWYG here. But you can fiddle around with this, try it out, go back and forth, and whatever. So Compose Looks can actually take you pretty far. So that's sort of the entry point of branding. There may be some people on the call who would say, that might be enough for us. And if it is, then I would suggest you try it, because if you don't have, if you're not in a large organization that has very clearly defined brand, like if you're a small construction company, for instance, you probably don't want the sea monster look, but slapping the logo up here on the left and changing some fonts and colors might make it feel enough like your own company. I'm not picking on construction people at all, but there are some environments where design isn't as important. A marketing company is going to be caring about every single pixel on this screen. They're probably not going to want to go with a composed look, but somebody who's running a dentist's office may not care all that much. So that's composed looks. It's pretty cool. Even if you don't think it's going to help you, you might want to just sort of fiddle around with it to see how it works, because you can, like I said, take things pretty far with it.
Mark, if you wouldn't mind just hitting that full screen on the top right there, right by the X, just so that we can, just everything is as full of the screen as possible.
How about F11? I don't want to do F11. What are you not seeing?
Oh, actually, we're seeing everything. We're actually seeing a couple boxes in the background as well. I'm not sure if the change in resolution impacted your dual monitor or what was.
I've only got one monitor here, so that's interesting. Well, I don't see anything else. I only see my browser window.
That's not a problem at all then. So just keep going. I apologize for the interruption.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I certainly want everyone to see what they're supposed to be seeing. So let me go back to the Design Manager again. So that's the pre-installed look. That's one of the places you can get to it. It's also available in Site Settings if you want to dive in that way. Device channels is another thing I mentioned. Right now we've got out of the box one default device channel, which basically means that everybody gets the same thing. There's no different master page being applied depending on what your device type is. But you can create channels. So for instance, you could name it, iPhone. I have an iPhone. And you can look in the user agent string, you give it an alias, and you actually have to do this. I'm not going to run through all of this. Description, and then device inclusion rules. So this is all based on user agent substrings. So for instance, you could look for Mozilla. You could look for iOS. Whatever it is you want to look for to sort of treat different devices differently. You can enable this kind of I forget what the device channel. I'm sorry, the user agent string looks like for an iPhone, but it would be something like this. And what you from top to bottom. So match that iPhone, then that one's going to win, and we won't make it down to the default one. What we might do is if we hit that iPhone rule and it actually matches, then we may load a different master page. So we can actually have different master pages based on different device classes. That's one way to differentiate the devices that you have coming to your site. And then the other way is more of a responsive web design, which we're not going to talk about today. So device channels can be great if you have very clearly understood devices. If you're inside an organization, you may have a very good handle on that. You know, everyone is using IE10. We know what the monitor sizes typically are. So we can actually come up with a set of device channels that make very good sense to our organization. When you're public facing, you have no idea what those devices are going to be coming to you. You're going to have Android phones, iPhones, you're going to have all sorts of different devices, phablets, tablets, PCs. So device channels might actually be too complicated a way to deal with it. A responsive design might make more sense. The next step would be to upload some design files. So this is where we come when we want to upload like an HTML-based design that a designer has given us. You typically these days are going to map a drive to this location. It gives you that link very easily to see right there. You can then look at what's going on there, either in SharePoint Designer. This is SharePoint Designer. So we see that I'm on Office 365. There's Oslo and Seattle master pages, which are the out-of-the-box ones. Or we can edit with something else. I'm using my favorite editor here at the moment is Sublime Text. So I can see the master pages and page layouts here, and I can edit them right here in Sublime Text because I have that drive mapped. This is the HTML version of the Oslo master page. When we have this publishing model enabled, we only edit the HTML files. We never edit the master. The HTML file, when we make edit to the HTML file, SharePoint automatically creates the master page for us. So we can stay in HTML land. Though if you look at this, you can see that there are a lot of things commented out that help tell SharePoint how to interpret this master page. Again, this is one of the out-of-the-box ones, so it's already sort of SharePointified, and it already has a lot of stuff in it. Back to the browser. So what we would usually do is upload some design files by just putting them in via the the map drive, and that's how you would definitely get things like CSS, JavaScript, other design assets. It says there like images or widgets that are more graphic treatment stuff. That's how we access things for editing. But for the master page, we would go to step 4. And this is where we actually upload the master page. You see we have 3 master pages here. I have a business analyst one, which is one that I've used for another demo, and then the 2 out-of-the-box ones, Oslo and Seattle. And these are all the HTML versions of master pages. So if I say convert an HTML file to a SharePoint master page, it says, okay, great, where's the HTML file? And I actually have one in my documents library in this site. I've uploaded a design. I actually, earlier today or yesterday, just searched on the web, where can I get a free design, a free HTML-based website design. And I grabbed this business portal one. That's sort of nice looking. That might be something that you might want to use for your organization. It's got some really nice sort of look and feel to it. That might be not a bad starting point. So we go here, we go into that business portal design that I've downloaded. They've given me a bunch of HTML files. I'm just going to pick the index.html that they have loaded, they have given me as part of that design. And I've already got it checked out. Oh, beautiful. Let me go and fix that. So what that's going to do is let us upload a file, and it will parse it and create that master page from the HTML version. Let me try that again. All right, so I have it in my documents library, sorry, and I'm going to do it from here. I don't know why that's happening. Let me go and grab it from my hard drive. I think it's because it's in my documents library, and I've got it open somewhere else, but I'll just quickly go around here. So we can upload any HTML file. Again, it doesn't really matter where it is. You notice I'm going over here into my file system and going after that same an index.html file. Okay, so I'm uploading it. It's there. Cool. So it's uploaded it. Now I can go and I can choose that master page from that HTML file from here and insert it. And SharePoint is going to upload that and convert it to a master page. You see that happen pretty quickly. We have some warnings and errors. So not all of these will import directly right away. We may have to make some edits. This has a form tag. We can't have a form tag because SharePoint uses form tags. So sometimes we have to adjust the HTML file a little bit. But we can do that by going right into our favorite editor. Again, I'm in Sublime Text here. I'm going to hit F5 just to refresh so that I can see my file, which is, where is it? I called it index.html, I think. Yeah. I'm going to go into SharePoint Designer. There it is. So you can see that I have it there. I can edit it in this interface. Just by, if you're a SharePoint Designer jock. Now you notice that SharePoint has put a whole bunch of stuff into that HTML file that will make it work with this whole Design Manager construct. Everything's inside comments, though. All that gray stuff is what's been added by SharePoint. So it's sort of master pageified our HTML page, which is pretty slick. And what we have in our SharePointified version of this master page is all the same stuff that we see in that template. We see some navigation at the top. We have, these are the home, support, about us, blog. Those are the default sort of pieces of navigation that we see in the design that we picked. So now if we hop back over into the master page screen, and I'm not going to deal with those warnings and errors right now, but I'm going to look at this other one that did successfully go. If I look at this page, this is just a slightly different design. You can see that I'm getting a WYSIWYG view of what that design looks like. So this is another one, business analyst one that I grabbed from the web for free a while ago. I can then go directly into snippets, and I can find out what snippets I want to replace those components that are inside my HTML-based master page. So for instance, if I want to use top navigation, and you see I get a preview, I actually have a sub-site in this site collection called HR Department. I get a preview of that top nav, and I get the snippet down here. And I can copy that to the clipboard, and then go into my editor and replace that entire menu that's in the design with the snippet that SharePoint has given me. It doesn't look all that pretty because it's a whole bunch of markup and comments that go out to the right. But that will actually start to make the design live. Instead of seeing the hardwired navigation links, we'll start to see dynamic stuff coming from SharePoint. And that's how the snippet library works, or snippet idea works. We can go and grab things like the site title. There's a little, you can think of these as the little widgets that were already in master pages before, but now they're wrapped up in these little snippets that we can go and grab and put into our HTML-based master pages. Rather than figuring out what all the settings are in here, we can actually change things right here. So for instance, if we change the appearance, we could make the background color, I always like to use fuchsia. And do a color picker. I can update that, and we're going to see that it gets ugly. So now it's got that background color. It's actually just showing around the preview box. So you can actually make some adjustments right here. When you click update, it changes the markup down here, which changes the preview. You can copy that markup and drop it into your HTML-based master page. And sort of go back and forth like this, adding the bits and pieces that make that design into a SharePoint master page. A search box, some vertical navigation, which is like the quick launch on the left, the site logo, the sign in or the welcome widget. All of these things are available to drop into your master pages, as well as even specific web parts. You'll notice that all of the web parts that you're used to seeing, or at least all the web parts that you're used to seeing in SharePoint 2013 are listed here. We can put web parts into the master page. Most people don't tend to do that. And then of course we can add custom ASP markup. I mean, we're not limited by what those buttons are that we have in the top. We can actually write things or drop sort of snippets or widgets into this snippets tool to sort of master pageify them as well. When you're done with all of that, you start to get a design that looks like this, where you're actually starting to get live links up here. This is actually based on the navigation settings of the page. Of the site. Right now, this is a lot of hardwired content, but we could start dropping in web part zones, things like that. They would take the design and move it into SharePoint. So that's that next step. If we go back to the Design Manager, we can edit the master pages, like I said, so that's that process. I know I'm going through it quickly. Usually this is at least a full part of a full day here, going through all of these details. Display templates, which I said we were going to skip here. If you're in publishing, you can do page layouts. If you're creating a publishing-based site, not just turned on publishing in a collaboration site. You get a similar preview. I have a test article page lying around that I can look at here, and I haven't changed a lot about it, but there's actually a separate snippets interface for page layouts, which is loading in this tab, and you'll notice that once it loads, we actually see, so this is the stuff we see with the master page in the ribbon, and once this finishes loading, you'll see that there's a different set of widgets or snippets that we can add to page layouts because they have different, purpose and different capability. We wouldn't be adding the top nav there. We would be adding different types of components. And it looks like that's not going to load anytime fast. But trust me that this becomes a dynamic list of snippets. Oh, there we go. That is more focused on page layouts. So, for instance, page fields. These are the fields that you're used to adding to page layouts in previous versions of SharePoint. But you can actually just get a snippet for it, something like summary links. Bang, you've got the summary links snippet right here with the markup. You can make some changes. There aren't that many parameters to this one. And then take that snippet and drop it into a page layout in the Design Manager. And back here. Once you're all done, you can publish and apply your design. You go into the master page gallery, approve it, check it in first and then approve it, and then it becomes a live master page that you can apply to the site collection. The other thing that you can do here, because this requires the publishing features, is to do this work to create a master page that you're going to use in non-publishing site collections. And then the master page that you've built this way is transportable. You can actually take the master page that you've gone through this process with and apply it to other types of site collections or subsites. So I think those are the main pieces of the Design Manager. I know we're probably past out of time at this point, and I know I'm trying to cover an awful lot. I'm gonna stop here though, because you probably have some questions. John's going to help me go through those questions. I'm going to pass things over to him, and he's going to steer while we go through those questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, very much, and thank you, everyone. Very much enjoy all of you being a part of this webinar. As Mark is taking a look at some of those questions we have there that got flagged, I just wanted to make sure that you all had our contact information. So on the left, you can obviously see Mark Anderson's email address, and you can see my email address there on the right-hand side. And please remember to take a look at our SharePoint, upcoming SharePoint course with Mark, both at the conference down in Dallas, if you're in the Dallas area or are interested in traveling, or you can feel free to check it out, the full course up in Boston, or take that course online. So please do take a look at both those things for me, and let me know when you get a chance to, if you have any interest in that. And Mark, without any further ado, any questions?
Yeah, I apologize. Now that I see all these questions, I can't see all the questions while I'm presenting. I'm sorry, all these questions about the screen resolution, screen size. I wish I had known that earlier. I apologize. So there are a couple real questions here. Where is the Design Manager located, in the program itself or in Central Admin? hopefully you saw that it's actually located right within the SharePoint site collection. You don't go anywhere near central admin. There's no reason for a designer in this whole construct to go anywhere near central admin, which makes your IT pros happy. And it's actually probably better for the designers anyway. So this is all through the SharePoint UI and the editing tools that your designers actually are comfortable using, rather than sort of feeling like you have to use SharePoint Designer or Visual Studio or something. You can use whatever editor you want. So that link is there if you have publishing turned on, publishing publishing infrastructure site collection feature. You'll see the design manager in the site actions dropdown. Yeah, more things about my resolution. I'm just trying to scroll through here and see if we can get to any other questions. I'm sorry, guys. Nope.
Well, thank you, Mark, very much. We're really getting close here on the time, so I'm going to flip back. Obviously, on the screen right now, you have the details for the course, so please do reach out and check out that course. If you have any questions, reach out to myself or to Mark. And for the last couple minutes here, as people are logging out, I'll put back on the screen our contact information, so you can reach out to us directly in case you have a question, any follow-up, or any feedback. So very much appreciate that, and thank you, Mark, so much, and everyone have a great day.